Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Spiritual Underground Podcast. As always, my name is Dan Reeves, and I am your host. If you're just stumbling upon this podcast for the first time, I will let you know that it is primarily 12-step recovery. Although I do have guests that got sober other ways, and we listened to the way they've done it. Bill Wilson said that we have no monopoly on this thing. And lately I've had a bunch of authors in, people talking about their books, and I always categorize it under continue to enlarge your spiritual life. That's something that our book says we must do, and sometimes it's a little hard to find refreshing and new ways to do that. And these authors come bouncing along my trail and are offering new and different ways to satisfy that requirement of recovery. But we're back to the meat and potato format of the Spiritual Underground podcast today. This gentleman is with me now, just recently celebrated 1 year of sobriety, and I'll let him tell his story. I want to go into a little bit, but I think I will stop. I will just say this. Most of us stumble out of the gates. It's just the way this thing is. So if you happen to be in that, don't feel like you're failing. It's just a part of your path to get there. I certainly did. I stumbled out through the gates for 4 solid years before I achieved and have been able to hold my current sobriety date. To my guest today is Sam. How's it going today, Sam?
Oh, it's going well. Going well.
You're on a snowy Sunday. I wasn't expecting to see snow when I woke up this morning.
I wasn't either. I knew there was going to be flooding, but I didn't know there was going to be any snow.
Yeah, a few of us even went. Brian Green's aunt, probably shouldn't. Brian, it don't matter. He's been on here too. Aunt lives down on the river in Utica, and they're expecting the Ohio River to get up into her home, and now it's one of them ones on stilts. It has a very limited bottom floor.
Yeah.
But she had all kinds of stuff. So we moved everything. It shouldn't get up to the top floor, so we went over, a crew of us, and moved stuff up to the deck and up inside, and she actually put a lot of stuff in totes, and some of the guys with pickup trucks hauled her stuff to the storage unit. And I guess she's lived there for a while, so you get used to that. I wouldn't ever get used to that.
I couldn't get used to that.
Yeah, flood. And then we're supposed to get potentially 5 or 6 inches of snow on Wednesday too.
I guess keep it coming, I guess, right?
I guess. I don't know. It slows my work life down, and I guess it probably does yours too.
Absolutely.
I thought about that at the time. What's your sobriety date, Sam?
It's August 11th of 2023.
August. So it's actually been, you just got an 18-month chip.
I sure did.
Yeah.
I sure did.
Sometimes it takes a little wrangling to get guys in here, and I don't know what the holdup was, but we won't worry about it. It's happened when it's supposed to happen.
Absolutely.
Were you born here?
Yes, I was actually the first person in my family that was born in Louisville, Kentucky. I was actually the first person in my family to be born in this country.
In the country? Mm-hmm. Do you have any siblings?
I have a brother and a half-sister. They're
older,
both
younger?
Older.
So they were both born in?
Latvia. It's a little country. It's one of the 3 countries that borders Russia on the European side. It's the middle country. I don't know if that's entirely a Baltic state or not, but I've
heard of it. There's a podcaster I listen to, the Meat Eater podcast.
Okay.
One of the guys, almost maybe one of the partners in the deal, he's Latvian.
Interesting.
They call him the Latvian Eagle. And not too long ago on there, he went over there and went hunting. At some kind of crazy hunting camp, man, and did it completely different than we do it around here.
I know they do a lot of things different than what we do here, for sure.
So you were born in Louisville. So you've lived here all your life?
I lived here all my life. I was born. I lived up around the Breckenridge Hikes Lane for a long time, and then ended up moving to J-Town, and that was pretty much where I grew up from the ages of 6 till about a year ago.
How was growing up? Tell me a little about your little kid life, elementary school, senior high, that all kind of stuff.
Well, so growing up, it was really tough. Obviously, me being the first person in my family to be born here. That was right when my parents moved to this country. And they had it pretty rough. We grew up very poor. There was a lot of things that, did not receive on my Christmas list. I always wanted to get a lot of things in Christmas, and we just couldn't afford it.
What year were you born?
96.
96. Okay.
Yeah, so, both parents working dead-end jobs, multiple of them at a time.
Native Latvian speakers?
When they moved here, they were, but, the Latvian community here is like very limited. Maybe not even.
Yeah.
It's
Well, what I was getting at is that they're coming over here. It makes it tough to get a job if you're not like fluent.
No, absolutely. You're only going to get like the jobs that, they were pizza delivery drivers, UPS. My dad did have skills as a mechanic or like in a body shop. But still at the end of the day, it was dead-end jobs that it just wasn't really making enough money, especially to raise two kids.
But they did it.
They did. They did. They made it work. Despite not getting everything what I wanted, I still had somewhat.
What do we say? You had what you needed.
Yeah, I had what I needed. I had my basic, shelter, food, and water.
Yeah.
So I definitely had my basic needs met, just not the materialistic needs that a lot of people, have the opportunity to get.
Well, that might be better in some regard. Sometimes, people that get everything they ever wanted. I'm not sure that's a better way to grow up, I'm not sure that as a formula to make you a better person.
I feel like if you grow up that way of like not getting the materialistic things in a harder life, it makes you become a better person versus where you get everything that you want.
Now you appreciate the things you get. You know, when everything's handed to you, you don't appreciate the stuff that you acquire on your own.
Take things life for granted too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so growing up was tough. I was a scrawny little kid with a big head. Like the size of my head I have now was probably the size of my head when I was like 7 years old. But just in a tiny, tiny body. So I did get bullied a lot. And that was tough to endure. Then there was another tough aspect of my life that I had to endure too. From the ages of 4 to 11, I was sexually assaulted and molested by, it was my mom's stepdad. Now, she also endured that same treatment when she was growing up, which is why we're so close today. We just have that trauma bond. In a sense. And I mean, it's my mother. I'm still going to have a bond with her regardless of the case, but it's just stronger from the same kind of trauma that we experienced. A lot more closer than what she is to my brother, in a sense. But she still loves us both.
What stopped that at 11?
I think just age. I think that was around the time where
he just stopped.
I'm more or less. I think it was both mutual. I think it was like because I had said no a couple of times at the end.
You were starting to resist.
I was starting to resist. I started to understand what was actually going on because at that age, you don't really know what's going on. And I started to resist, and I did send him some threats that I was going to speak about this, and I think that's what put a halt to it.
Did you?
Eventually. Yeah, I did. At the end, or like when I turned 18, I did.
Was he still alive?
He was.
Did he receive any repercussions on that?
Not like legally.
Mm-hmm.
But, my grandma did divorce him. They sent him into the Jewish Community Center. They have an apartment complex called Shalom Towers. And it helps refugees to get like shelter, and he ended up getting a place there. And shortly after that, he passed away with a heart attack. and he already had several heart attacks prior to that.
I'm sorry that happened to you, man.
It was definitely a challenging obstacle to overcome throughout my life, for sure. But
one that unbelievable number of people deal with one way or another. It might come packaged differently.
Mm-hmm.
I had one that was voluntarily. I volunteered for it. And the other little kid was the same age as me, and we carried on a relationship, doing everything two boys can do with one another for years. And I didn't even know, like you said, I've become a certain age when I started feeling like, I don't know if this is right or not. This don't feel right. But in the beginning, it was fine.
Right.
But still, the shame that I had over growing up and starting to get to school, and people were calling each other gay and all that. And I remember I could take you to the spot where, because I grew up in this house. I can take you to the spot. It's a parking lot now, but there was an apple tree there when I was a kid, and we were sitting around the apple tree, and somebody said something about gay, and I said, "What is gay?" And I didn't even know. And this guy tells me. And they've been using a derogatory term,
Right.
And all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, I've been doing that. Now I had stopped some time ago. That didn't carry into, at that particular time. But instantly I was like, well, that's never coming out of the closet.
Right.
That's going to the grave with me. I'll never speak about it.
And I was the same way with that too. I didn't want to speak about it because around that time, that was when I started to learn what that word was. And I was just like, I know that that's not what I am. And I know that what happened to me wasn't voluntarily. But still, my ego still tried to play. It was like, well, I still was in that, situation. And I didn't want to get judged from it.
Shame.
The shame, the guilt, remorse, everything. But more particularly the shame of it. And I was just like, I'm taking that to the grave. I'm never speaking on it. And I think that also hindered me growing up being able to talk to women. I struggled trying to talk to women. I was one of those kids where I'd be sweating profusely, just shaking, not being able to get my words out and just looking like a fool. To where it was tough. I didn't get any attention from that realm. Even though I tried several times, it just always ended up being ugly. But yeah, growing up, going towards middle school, pretty much actually right after those events stopped, led to my first cigarette at age 11. And the first cigarette led to my first joint. And then that first joint led to my first drinking escapade. And then that also led to the first pills I took. So that was in a span of just 1 year.
Really?
From the ages of 11 to 12. The drinking in the weed was ones that I took a little bit longer. Not so much as the cigarettes and the pills at that particular time. I ended up getting caught by my parents around age 12, 13. They try to build a prison around me, to where I couldn't hang out with the kids in the neighborhood, to prevent me from, making it worse. And then that's when I got introduced to racing BMX. I did that I started when I was about 12 years old and stopped in 2020. So I raced for about 13 years. Got somewhat decent into it. I had fun with it. I also got a lot of injuries from it too.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like fun though. That would have been a fun, I was a make-believe BMXer, just riding around the streets and sidekicking garbage cans and jumping any bump that I could think I could get some air off of.
Yeah, it was a fun experience to go through. It's not a sport that you want to go professionally or anything, because there's just no money involved. you can get money, but you would have to place like top 3, if not win every race, just to be able to make some type of living. Like you probably would make like $80,000 a year.
Yeah, and you're gonna age out of that sort of, aren't you? One way or the other. I mean, you can't BMX bike
No.
too awful damn long, I wouldn't think.
No, and injuries is very prevalent because I mean it's such a tight course, and you're racing with at most 8 people at a time, and obviously everybody's gonna bump elbows and everything, and you're on just 2 wheels, so you get bumped. Depending on your size, you're either going straight off or you're gonna stick it out. But oftentimes you're gonna take a spill. I've
watched a little bit of it.
I've taken a lot of spills, for sure. Broken a lot of bones. I think the funniest one was when I broke both wrists at the same time. I was 16 years old. There was 3 weeks left of junior year. Of course, I was the center of attention throughout the entire school. I mean, it's kind of hard not to be when you're walking around looking like a field goal. Just throw 2 hands up, and you're just looking like a field goal. And I got a lot of sympathy out of it, but also in that time, they did prescribe me pain pills. And my mother, she just found out about it when I made my amends, but at the time she didn't. I was abusing all the ones I got, because she would try to prevent me from she only gave me enough to last through the school day, but I knew where she kept it. So I took a few extra ones, of course, like any true alcoholic would.
Yeah, I got hurt a lot when I was a kid. It was just accident prone, man, and I just did risky stuff, and I got hurt a lot. And they would always, I remember my mom would be with me at the hospital, and they'd ask me if I needed pain pills, and there was something in me that wanted to be tough enough to say no. No, I don't need. Mom would say, yeah, get them. Yep. And Mom would dole a couple out to me, and I didn't see this until years later. Dole a few out to me, and then after a day or so, she'd say, "Oh, you ought to be all right on the Tylenol now," and she was keeping all of them and using them. And my mom was addicted to pain pills for probably my entire life and maybe longer. But it was similar to this. It was because they were prescribed to her so often for a while that she got hooked on them, and it wasn't like she wasn't really using them recreationally like I did. Gotcha. But she got hooked on them, and once after a little bit, you got to have them in order to feel okay.
No, absolutely.
And back then, the doctors was really doling them out, man. I always joke around. It's like she would get like mayonnaise jars full of them. It looked like to me. It really wasn't, but they were bigger than normal prescription jars full of pain pills and big counts. 180 10 milligram Lortabs, and just crazy numbers of them. And that's actually, see, I took them when I was a kid, and I compound fractured my right shin when I was 19, and I was in the hospital, and they were giving me something a little better in there, and I don't even remember what it was, but that was the first time that I actually was like, oh, I guess. But then I didn't end up with a pain pill problem until I was in my middle 30s, sometime around that neighborhood. That's when the alcohol quit working. Mm-hmm. And I saw Mom's pain pills and thought, I wonder if this will help. And it certainly did.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what that thing about, I've said this before too, but that thing where you say, I'll steal your drugs and help you look for them. I did that with my mom.
I did that with so many people. I did that with several of my so-called friends I had at that time.
Yeah, I did it with friends too, but there seems to, I don't know, I have a little bit of a lower point on it when I did it with my mom. That was steal her pills and sit there, and she would tell me about they're missing, and I don't know where they're going, and I know I'm not taking that many of them. And I'd throw other people under the bus, who's been here, who's been around,
Right. My parents didn't have any problems, but I will say this: if my mom did have a problem and she had those or I wouldn't even say had a problem, but if she was prescribed or had a problem and
Yeah, if they were around, you'd have been taking them.
and I would have helped her look for them too. But yeah,
They go back to the broken arms. Is that when you, or broken wrists? Is that when you really felt this stuff grab you? Is that what you were getting at?
In a sense, yeah. Because I remember it like clear as day. It was in first period. It was an English class, and I was just sitting there, just staring at the window. I mean, because I got 2 broken wrists. I'm not going to be able to do any work anyway. So I just stared at the window, and one of my friends was looking at me, and he knew what I was on, because he was partaking in alcohol and drugs too at the time, and he was like, "Oh, I know exactly what you're going through right now." And I just like looked at him with like this foggy eyes, and I was just like, "Yep," and then just carried on. But so I knew that at that point, like, I really enjoyed it, but I didn't get back into doing, alcohol, weed, or drugs until I graduated high school. So I went through my senior year. I didn't do anything. And the day of graduation, I literally hit up the neighborhood weed guy, and then I would walk over to another friend's house who I knew was 21, and I knew he would be able to buy liquor. And that's when the gravy train just took off, and I was on the races at that point. It became like an everyday thing, either drinking or smoking.
Were you working?
Yeah, actually I was. When I turned 18, I started working. I didn't have a car at the time just yet. I didn't get a car until I was about 19. I started working, and then I ended up having to get 2 jobs just to be able to fund my drinking and drugging. But at that time too, I started hanging out with the neighborhood kids that, my parents had tried to build this prison wall for me not to associate myself with them. There was only like one time that I actually, participated in something I really shouldn't have. Ended up robbing a drug dealer with an unloaded gun. That moment actually kind of like told me that I wasn't meant for that life. Because when I tried to rob him, we were in McDonald's parking lot, and he tried to chase after me, and I tried to pull out the unloaded gun, and I dropped it. And then I tried to pick it up, and then I tried to cock it back, and I was just like, back up. And then I got back in the car, and then
whose gun was it?
I was some guy.
Some dude.
Just some dude. It was a situation which I shouldn't have even been involved.
Sure.
It was just kind of one of those things where they try to bring me on to just do stupid things with. And that pretty much right then and there told me that wasn't the life that I was meant to be in. However, I still associated with all those guys. Looking back at it now, everybody that I associated with is either in jail or dead, or still doing stupid things. I think only one of them is just alive, just doing stupid things, but majority of them are either in jail or dead. And that pretty much was at the age of 19. That's when I got introduced back to pills and alcohol. That's when it, at 19 all the way up to about 27.
Alcohol, opiates and alcohol. These are a few of my favorite things. It's the combination I wanted right there. And I didn't like smoking dope. I did when I was a kid, when I was younger. And I stayed high through most of my school. We'd smoked marijuana on the way to school almost every day, from probably 9th grade or so on. But it would not, I didn't like stuff that drugged me down.
Right.
And pot, I could smoke a joint like when it's bedtime.
Yeah.
But pain pills act like speed in me if I had the right dosage.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I was up and ready to go, drink all night.
I was up, ready to go, drink all night. I still smoked a lot of weed at the time, too. I was one of those that just like, I'd take a concoction of everything. Especially when I was about 23, 24. That's when I started working in the restaurant business as a server. I just was doing everything. I remember I actually had, oh man, talk about a time. I had shoulder surgery right when COVID started. I injured it right when COVID started, and my surgery was delayed up until June. So, I mean, I was still knee deep in my opiate and alcohol addiction at that time anyway. But finally, when I got my surgery, they were prescribing me like 40 to 60 pills a week with the shoulder surgery, and that lasted for about 4 months. So I had those. I still had the pills that I was getting off the streets. I had my alcohol. I had my weed. I had even cocaine, and I would mix all of it, and it was a dangerous concoction too. I'm lucky to even be alive after the party events that I was attending, because when you're a server, I'm not saying that that's everybody's life of being a server, but majority of them are kids in college partying it up, and I would join them. And there was often times where I had even Xanax escapades too. Again, another moment, and lucky I'm to be alive. I was on my way back to. At the time, I was living with my parents up until I went to treatment. So I lived with them up until I was 27. And they live in the boonies. So it was 30 minutes to get anywhere. And I took in a handful of Xanax on my way home. And I was about 2 minutes away from my parents' house. I was only 2 minutes away. I only had 2 minutes worth of driving, and then I can go home and, black out and pass out and whatnot. But, I guess I took it a little too late, or too soon, however you want to word it. But I ended up passing out on the wheel and drove off a cliff. Luckily enough, what saved me was a tree. It stopped the last roll. I got it back on the four wheels. I didn't get hurt, with an exception of like a bruise to my sternum. And the only thing I remember from it was I just every roll, I just kept saying "ow, ow, ow," and then at the last one it stopped. But the airbag smacked me in my face, and I was just like, "Fuck!" And then I got out and I looked up and realized it was a cliff, and I looked down and saw my car. My car was in shambles at that point, and I was just like, I'm lucky to be alive. But I also took it for granted. And, at times where, life was bad, I always was just like, well, God hates me. Well, if God hated me, he wouldn't have put that tree there to save my life.
Were you just on Xanax, or were you drinking too?
I may have had a few that night.
Did you get in trouble?
Like with the law?
DUI kind of.
No. I actually, it's funny. I always drove intoxicated, but never had a DUI. Never had a DUI. And there should have been times where I should have gotten a DUI.
All of us.
There was times where I wrecked my car, cops came out, and I should have had a DUI, but somehow escaped that. And still at that point, I was thinking God hated me. If God hated me, I would have gotten a DUI, several of them, and I'd be in jail right now, and or not have a license. But that was just the way of thinking I have in the madness. And I knew I was a true alcoholic when I thought, I had a small escapade with acid too. Like the first time I took acid, I took it the very next day. That's how much I loved it. And like the moral of the story is like anything that could change how I felt and my way of thinking, I took it. The only thing I never really got on was crack or meth or actual heroin. Now I did, at the ending of my madness, I was on fentanyl because of course my opiate sources depleted, and I needed something to go with my alcohol. So that's when fentanyl came into my life, and I played a risky.
How was you getting? In what form was you getting that?
In pills.
From the Chinese? The Mexican blue pain pills.
Yep. That's how pretty much. And I was always a snorter. I was never really an IV user. But I would get a handful of those, get my Weller bourbon, and go on my merry way home. That's how it was every day. But I had to work 2 jobs, and I literally worked from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, and just get intoxicated throughout the entire tenure of working, because that was the only time I could fit it in. But I also needed to work to pay for my habits. And
you could have drank cheaper whiskey.
I could have, but
it's a funny thing, we get into this like high roller kind of thing. Like if I'm buying cheap shit, that's a bigger problem than if I'm buying the expensive shit. If I'm buying the expensive shit, I'm fucking rolling.
That's exactly how I felt. It's
a crazy dynamic.
It's the way my thinking was, like, oh, I'm buying expensive bourbon, I'm a high roller. In reality, it was not shit, but there was coming to a point in the end when I was on the fentanyl, I wasn't able to make enough money to fund my habits. So I had to result in other ways, whether it be stealing money or stealing from coworkers or stealing from residents at the job that I worked at, or, doing anything that involved like stealing or selling, even the clothes off my back just to be able to get, my pills. Because I had an alcohol problem, but also had a pill problem, so I had to have both. Well, I couldn't just live with just one. I needed both concoctions. So, I did a lot of things that I wasn't entirely proud of. And then I got introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, which Spiritual Underground was the very first meeting I ever went to.
How'd that happen?
I woke up one day, and I took my last my last pills and my last swig, and I was about to take a shower, and I was just like, I can't live like this. So I broke down in front of my mom and told her that, like, I have a problem. Now she's oblivious, or I wouldn't say oblivious, but she just wasn't aware of what to do in that situation because she's never had to.
Right. Most people don't know what to do, and they're pretty fortunate that that's the case. If you know what to do, you've had a rough road somehow or another.
Exactly. But she did. So there is someone that's in the rooms that, would cut her hair and cut mine too at the time.
So she talked to him?
Mm-hmm.
Or she had you talk to him?
She had talked to him, and then I reached out to him. And then he invited me to come to SU that night, because that was when it was on a Tuesday. If I remember it correctly, it was October 22nd of 2022. So I came out, and I was in the early stages of detox at that time, and I was just having it rough. Mm-hmm. I remember I actually spoke at that meeting too, which I have I wouldn't say I have a fear of public speaking, but at the same token, like, I do have like a little bit of anxiety of speaking in front of like a room full of people. But
well, it's certainly hard to come into Alcoholics Anonymous for sure and admit you got a problem for the first time and all that kind of stuff. No matter if you were an actual public speaker for occupation, I think you'd still have trouble doing that.
Right. No, absolutely. But yeah, I remember there was a person in that meeting that was friends with that person that did hair. They were actually very good friends, still good friends to this day. And he had got my number, and he called me, and he was just like, yeah, he was like, I knew the moment you took a seat and just sat for a minute, I knew exactly what your problem was. And then he asked me, he's like, it was pills, isn't it? And I was like, pills and alcohol. He was like, oh yeah. He was like, you need to go detox. And I was like, okay. So I went to the Brook. I went to the hospital. And then they did an interview for the Brook, and then I got sent to the Brook. Stayed there just for detox.
KMI or DuPont?
DuPont. Did my detox. Came back out, got a sponsor, and was able to, I think, stay sober for like about a week and a half.
You didn't do IOP?
Nope. I thought, because I was oblivious to the fact, I was like, okay, I just need to get through the DTs and then I'll be fine. Because I was oblivious to the fact that, like, I knew I had a problem, but I felt like I can overcome that problem as long as I get through the DTs. Like any other true alcoholic, they think they can just do DTs or get through the detox at a.
Then I'll be all right.
I'll be all right. That wasn't the case for me. Managed for about a week and a half. That was the longest sobriety I have had up until this point. Ended up getting COVID. And then one of my sources for real opiates, which at that point it was depleted. He had hit me up, and I had a little bit of money, and I was just like, yeah, I'll take whatever you have. And I did what I was supposed to do. I had called a friend, that same friend that suggested the Brook. And I said, I think I might have do a bad decision. And he tried to talk me out of it. And I was like, okay. But I still went and did that decision. It was just like the power of the disease, had a stronghold on me.
Well, COVID is not a whole lot different than opiate withdrawals in the sense of the misery.
Right.
So yeah, anything to make me feel better.
Absolutely. That is just the way, our disease likes to trick us in various ways like that. But ended up doing that, got that. It didn't take longer than a day and a half to get back on fentanyl at that point. And then I was back on rolling. Would tell my sponsor, like maybe a week or two after, said I'm sober, I'd relapsed. Then I think I did like one more trip to the Brook. But that time, like the day I got out, was went right back to where I left off.
I think it's easier to relapse as you do that. The more you relapse, I always say it's like if you cheat on your girlfriend, it's easier to cheat on her again. And the same thing with relapsing. It for some reason it gets easier. Like the first time you do it, you feel pretty rotten, like I really failed here, But then you do it again and do it again, and it starts to normalize, and you're like, yeah, it's no big deal that I'm relapsing. Just
like no big deal. That pretty much lasted for about like 11 months.
And that's what I mean about stumbling out of the gates.
Yeah, I was definitely stumbling for sure. I would do the same like motion. I would get through like maybe the first step, maybe the second step. Say that I have like a month of sobriety when I didn't even have a day. Then come clean. And then we would restart, and then that lasted for about 11 months. First sponsor fired me, got the second sponsor. He dealt with my, bullshit for that amount of time. Same thing. except that time I think there was at one point where I said I had 3 months, and that was as far as I could drag on the lie. And then I would restart. I mean, a lot of people say they have relapse in their story. I don't classify it as I have a relapse in my story. It's more or less just
Never
tumbling.
really stopped.
Yeah, just never really stopped.
I agree with that. I got a year of sobriety in my from 2011, 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started back up again, and I had worked the steps in that window and all that. And, when you're not what you're doing, you're just keeping on using.
Yeah. Just
with some periods of sobriety blocked in here now and again.
And those periods were nothing more than a couple hours, if that.
Well, you said you'd like a week and a half at one point or something?
First time, yeah. Just the first time, and then that was it.
Okay, so that was the longest period. I remember you said that's the longest you had until you actually was able to hang on to this current sobriety date.
Correct. So yeah, that lasted a while. I was still going to AA meetings. It was just,
getting up and talking and saying shit, and everybody knew you was high.
I know there was a lot of people pissed about that because
It's not a piss thing though. It's more of a sympathy kind of pissed. It's not like we're mad at you, but
it's like, why don't you get it?
And you're, I really have to fight that thing because I did the same thing, and when I get to feeling like that, as you said the other day, I'm pretty quick today to talk the truth most of the time.
You absolutely are.
I think I do. Some people take that and just let a guy just find his way like that, and that has its value too. And in a big group like ours, some people are doing that, and some people are saying, "Get your shit together." And if I feel like if I don't make something out of it, then we're not helping you.
No, absolutely. I feel like
I hope I'm never mean about it, but it's awful hard to not take it mean when you're stumbling along and somebody's trying to say, "Hey, man."
Well, yeah. And even if it's me, I mean, like they say, the truth hurts.
Yeah.
And no matter how,
tough love.
It's just tough love. And I mean, they may take it out of perception of like you're being mean, but it's that if you look at it in a different perception, it's that you love the guy and you hate to see them, stumbling like that. And you have to tell the truth, and sometimes it may come across as you being mean, but
you wouldn't be keeping on coming back if you didn't want it to. See, there's a thing, and I know, and I say this too, this thing acts like a computer virus or like a parasite. It hijacks your operating system, but you got enough punch through that you keep on showing up. So I know there's something in there that's wanting this, right? Guys that just disappear, I don't bother them.
No, absolutely. There was like a part of me every time like I would, come to meetings, like there was a part of me that like wanted to get sobriety, but there was also that part of where my disease had such a gripe on me that I was hearing what needed to be done, but my disease tried to play tricks on me and try to say, well, that doesn't work. So just continue doing what you're doing, even though clearly it does work because there's
all these guys are not lying, and it's pretty apparent.
And it's pretty apparent. It's like they're not, they have happy lives. They have smiles on their face. I'm over here with a sad face.
Getting up talking about good stuff that's happening in their lives, and it's pretty sucky too from that other side of it. And I'll commend you for doing that because most of the time the disease will run you out of the room that way when you're hearing these other people getting it and they're all happy, joyous, and free, and you're not. It's damn tough to sit there and listen to that bullshit.
No, fair point. No, I don't.
The disease does not. The disease, like you said, the disease is just sticking an ice pick in your kidney the whole time.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Because you're like, dang, why am I such a loser, and how come I can't get this? And
it's funny because like I even though hearing it in meetings, like it wouldn't hit me until either like when I got home or when I wake up. but then of course my disease will like kick in and, you know, go get high or go get drunk and then, you know, get that temporary relief and then, you know, go to meetings and then hear it and then like I can withstand hearing it, but then come back home and it's just like, well, why the hell can I not get it? Like, what am I doing wrong? You know, and it took me getting sent to treatment. Now that was a funny story of how I got to treatment.
Yeah, so you went to detox twice, I think you said. And
Yeah.
now this time you're signing up for more of a long-term thing.
Yes, but it wasn't voluntarily. So what had happened was there was a time I was at work, and thankfully this happened because the path that I was on, I ended up finding cheaper pills, and that only lasted for about a week or two. So I was able to get a lot more at this particular time. And I was at work, and I clocked out, ready to go home. I was actually on my way to, you know, go kill some time before getting my next bag. And I still had a little bit of alcohol left with me too. But I was in the parking garage. Normally, I don't park in the parking garage. The only reason why I had to at that time is because they had workers at the parking ramp. And so it forced me to park in the garage. And in the parking garage, you know, I was, you know, enclosed and I didn't think anyone would see me, so I just enjoyed my time there. Rather than if I was on the parking ramp, I would have been out the door, off the ramp, and be on my way somewhere else. But I had this like seclusion and privacy. And so I had broke up some pills, I had taken a shot, and then I ended up passing out with my car on in the parking garage. And a resident had saw me. Funny enough, that resident who saw me, his partner is in recovery. Has 18 years or almost 20, give or take. I can't remember exactly his how much sobriety he has, but he ended up telling maintenance crew came and got me, had all my stuff on my lap. They got me out, smacked me a couple times to get me, you know, to get coherent. Ended up calling my parents because at the time I was working with my dad. Called the general manager. At that point, it didn't look good. Like at that point, it was already prompted that I should have been fired, or I should be getting fired. And at that point, you know, my dad has worked there for 15 years. I just made him look bad. So more than likely, I'm about to get kicked out because I keep telling him that I'm going to meetings sober, but I'm not sober. So I was pretty much on the verge of just losing everything. So we went home. Next morning, I stayed home, but my dad went to work. The general manager, talked to the board of directors at that job, and because my dad has been working there for 15 years, they'd be willing to send me to treatment instead of firing me. Which was, now looking at it now, that was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And so we ended up trying to find, you know, treatments that would take my insurance. Ended up finding Robert Alexander Center. It was actually either Robert Alexander Center or some rehab in Bowling Green. And I was like, treatment like about 10 minutes away from my parents' house, or a treatment like an hour and 40 minutes away. Let's go to the one 10 minutes away. So I got a call back saying I can come in that night to do intake and whatnot. And that whole ride, I was thinking, because I was getting told that they were going to do random tests on me too when I got back to work. And I was like, the whole ride, I was just like, like any other alcoholic and addict, we're plotting how we can still do what we want to do, even though we have restrictions, coming our way. And that was my whole thought process on the way to treatment. Now, when I got to treatment and got through the DTs, we joke about it today, and I think it's hilarious, but so my sobriety date is August 11th. On August 13th, there was a girl that walked in, and I had met her at the Token Club, and she was in the same friend group that I was in, of the young peoples of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we knew each other, but we really didn't know each other. So when she got to treatment, we started talking for a second, but she had her own concoction of what she was coming off of. So her whole DTs, A, she doesn't remember him, and B, she was totally crazy, which I kind of liked because I'm a true alcoholic. But during that time, we got to know each other, and at that time, I also wasn't trying to, get in a relationship or get to know this person, but she was the only person that I knew there. So it was just like a familiar kind of person just to talk to. And then there was a group facilitator there that I still talk to this day. We send daily commitments to each other. It was something about like how he did group that shifted like my way of thinking. And that shift of thinking was, okay, everything that I've tried in life, I failed. This is an opportunity to try to get sober. I tried it once, I failed, but I wasn't doing it the right way. I didn't give it enough shot to continue through the steps to see where it would take me.
You know in your heart when you're not doing it right, whatever that is, even if it's taking a shortcut at work and not doing something right, when you're not operating, doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. And it was just like one night there, I was just like, you know what? Let's actually take this seriously. And the way that I took it seriously at that time was, if you've been in treatment with a detox residential, like you go through groups like all day. And there may have been like 2 or 3 of us that was actually taking notes of what the group facilitator was talking about. And I was one of those people that, started taking notes. And he actually pointed out that same group facilitator, he was like, I see 2, 3 people taking notes here. And I see the rest of you guys just staring. Those people that are taking notes shows that they're serious versus you guys who are just either talking or whispering. You're not taking this seriously. He was like, I guarantee you the day you get out, you're going to relapse. He was stone cold truth. I loved it. It was to the point where, like, selfishly, there would be, like, it was the 10 o'clock groups. They had 2 group facilitators, and we had a big group, so we would split off. I would still try to sneak my way to get into his groups, because anything that he said, it touched me.
I like to say certain people speak a frequency I can hear, and other people I can't. I can't hear what they're saying. I can't hear the message coming from them.
Exactly. But also during that treatment, or my stay at the treatment, I have experienced like a few spiritual experiences, where I actually, like, as soon as I experienced them, that's what solidified my shift of thinking to actually take sobriety seriously and just surrender, take all the suggestions, everything. I thought my time at treatment was I was just going to go to the detox and residential and be out in 30 days and then go back to work. and maybe do IOP. But my therapist, who I do see at meetings from time to time, he also helped me too, as my therapist there. He laid out this game plan or he asked me what I wanted to do, and then he laid out his game plan of the chances of sobriety working of his plan versus my plan. So as I said, my plan was just a detox and residential. Well, he outlined a plan of where I do detox residential, then go to PHP, and then IOP, and then sober living. And I was just like, okay. And the only thing that I had to ask him was, at one point, would I be able to get back to work? Because that's going to determine, if I can take that enough time, and if they'll allow me to take that time off to be able to do all these things. And he said, you should be able to go back to work when you get an IOP. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, I'm for that plan as long as my work allows me to be gone for that long. And then I told, I don't even know what that job title is. I wouldn't say it's not the clinical director, but caseworker. I talked to my caseworker to get in contact with my job to see if I can be gone for that long. And the day that I was supposed to have family therapy, which both my parents come in, and it would be both my parents, me, and my therapist. My caseworker got me, and told me, she was like, so I talked to your general manager, and she says she's all for you taking off to go through PHP. And I was like, okay, cool. And she was like, however, and I was like, what do you mean, however? She was like, you're about to use up all of your time off, therefore nothing's going to pay for your insurance. I was like, okay, so what does that mean? And she was like, well, if you don't have anything paying for your insurance is not going to cover you here. And I was like, oh, so what you're saying is whenever I run out of my time at work, I pretty much have to leave. And she was like, well, we could talk about, scholarship or something like that if you can qualify for that. And I mean, that whole time, I was just in my head, like, panicking, because at that point, I didn't want to leave. I was like, I want to stay as long as I can to get this. And I talked to that group facilitator, and he was like, hey, just have faith. Say the serenity prayer before you go in that family therapy, because my dad works there. So he can give me the inside scoop that I'm not hearing between the caseworker and the general manager. And I told him that. And he was like, just have some faith. Say the serenity prayer before you walk in. And just let God take the wheel. And I was like, okay. Still at that point, like, I was still, like, having anxiety. And family therapy came. I said the serenity prayer right before I walked in out loud. And I sat down and I told him what, I got told. And my dad immediately, like, interrupted, and he was like, the time that you have off, we're using the bare minimum for each day to pay for your insurance. And the way that we calculated it is by the time you get back to work, you would have, like, maybe a couple hours left of your time off. So you have more than enough hours to be able to do that for it to pay for your insurance, and you can still stay here. And I consider that was like one of my first spiritual experiences there, because that told me that God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And that, this is what my higher power, this is where he wants me at. And it's always going to work out some way or another as long as I lean towards him. So I was like, that's what shifted my thinking of believing in a higher power and taking it more seriously and fully surrender at that point. Then, of course, during my tenure there. I was getting closer and closer with the girlfriend that I have today. And another cool, like, spiritual experience that we both experienced at that time. It was just me and her outside. And this old dude that was outside, but he was far off. We were just, like, looking up in the sky. And we saw a comet roll through. I've never seen a comet. Now, I thought it was a meteor. But what considered that as a comet for me was the day of my 1 year. I'll kind of get into that when I get to that point, but it was, a red ball with a little flame at the end is what we saw. And we went inside prancing around. We were like, we just seen a comet. But the old guy tried to say it was a meteor. And we were just like, we don't think that was a meteor.
I don't know that there'd be a whole lot of difference in the significance if it was important to you. It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't. There was something that we saw that we wouldn't normally.
Some celestial flame moving through the sky,
which we would never see, like on just a random night. I mean, they often come here and there, but it was just a cool experience that her and I got to experience. We love to joke around that God sent her when you're in rehab, because we did get labeled as the rehab romance, and we knew that we kept getting told, like, this isn't gonna work. You guys are fooling yourself. We got the whole spiel, and it even got to a point where the guy that did my intake at RAC, him and I got into it because he tried to because he led group one night, and he led he was talking about rehab romance. There was only just her and I that got labeled as the rehab romance, so he kind of like the whole big group knew that he was talking about us without saying our names, and it pissed us off, and we got to like a big argument, which, funny enough, I actually made amends for that when I got to my 9th step, and we're still cool to this day now, but there was a time where we weren't, and he was avoiding giving me his number, because even though we're in recovery and we have time over our belt, like it says in the book, like, we're not saints. We're human. People make mistakes, and he did make a mistake. I kind of won't get into it too deep because it was a poor mistake that he did, and he knows it was a mistake and he shouldn't have done it. But it was relatable to the rehab romance, and I felt some type of way, and that's why he didn't give me his number, but that's besides the point. But we knew going in when we left RAC that our odds of working was stacked against us extremely. But we know that it can work as long as we put recovery first. And that's what we did. We put recovery first. I stayed at PHP. She did PHP and IOP, but I went to sober living. She didn't. And I stayed at sober living and fulfilled my commitment at the Talbot House. So I was in treatment for 10 months, 10 or 11 months, give or take. And then I had several spiritual experiences doing the steps. I really felt one doing the 3rd step. Really felt one doing the 5th step and the 9th step. And of course, when I got into meditation, especially with my sponsor, we actually did one recently, and it was, I got a lot out of it, to where now I do meditate on the regular. Now, there was a point in time where I was not meditating until I got to the 11th step, and at that point, that was when I was at the retreat, and you had mentioned that, like, you know, meditation is key, and if you leave something out, I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but the way I perceived it was, even if you may not relapse, but if you do everything that it says in the 12 steps, your chances of preventing a relapse is a lot more significant than leaving just one thing out. I know you didn't word it.
Say my normal statement is that this is not an a la carte deal. You can't pick and choose which of these elements that you're going to do and which ones of them you're not going to do. And if you leave some stuff out, or you're jeopardizing. And even if you don't relapse, you're not getting everything out of recovery that's available to you. And people don't meditate. It's just something that they don't do. And you can usually, been around for a little bit, you can usually tell.
No, for sure. Yeah, that's exactly what you said at the retreat. I couldn't, until you said it just now, I couldn't exactly tell you word for word what you said, but that did stick with me. And then I actually started meditating, and it took some time to actually get it to the point where I was doing it on an everyday basis.
And, and I'm glad to hear that. And a lot of people feel that, they need to be meditating for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour or, all this. My daily meditations is about 5 minutes. Sometimes I meditate longer, but I get some stillness in my mornings every day, 5 to 10 minutes.
And that's usually, like, if I know I have a busy day, I'll do the 5-10 minutes as well. But if I have time on my belt, like, I will do like 20 or 30 minutes too.
Yeah, it never hurts to do more, but
absolutely not.
5 is better than none.
Absolutely.
And, when in early recovery, I was doing was turning on guided meditations as 20 and 30 minutes long in the morning, and going to a meditation meeting where we meditate for about 30 or 40 minutes and then discussed it. And I'd hear some people around me talking about they meditated for an hour a day, and and it's kind of set me up for thinking I was falling short somehow or another because I wasn't meditating for a whole hour, and that's a long time to. I don't think that's required. Although now and again, I'll find myself in meditations that long.
And it happens. I just exactly what you said. Like, 5 minutes is better than 0. As long as you fit it somewhere. Of where it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, as long as you fit it in your day, that's what matters.
I just don't find any of these critical elements that are especially listed in the short form of the 12 steps. I can't see any way I can let myself off the hook of any of that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. But I don't think when I went to the retreat I was on the 11th step though. So it wasn't. I know that it was preached. I wouldn't say preached, but it was suggested to me at my treatment facility to meditate as much as I could.
I get people doing it on day one.
Gotcha.
Even I got a little 3.5 minute third step meditation. And I say, just start here. Just push play and listen to this in the morning.
Right.
We'll add on as we can.
Right. Yeah, I try to tell my sponsees, like I try to tell them, like, now, I tell them, like, what I'm about to say is very hypocritical because I didn't do it in my early recovery, but then I preface it as, like, I wish I did. Because it made a lot of a difference once I started, and that's how I try to teach my sponsees about meditation as well.
It's one of my items in my ground rules. Where you at on prayer and meditation? Because we're starting now, and if you need me to give you a prayer to start with, I have that, and if you need some help with the meditation, I have that too. I will lay it at your feet. All you got to do is do it.
Absolutely.
For the first long time, and I've said this 100 times too, I get to thinking, but I didn't know how to pray. I guess I would tell myself that. And I'd heard Brother Luke say when he was speaking, and I was real early, that he gets up every morning and does a first and a second and a third step prayer every morning. And for whatever reason, that kind of like frequency thing had got to me. And I got home that night and I Googled up some first step prayers and second step prayers, and I just used the third step prayer out of the book. And I printed it out on a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and taped it to the dresser on my side of the bed. Because I would get up and I would forget, and I'd be on my way to work and whatever. Well, that piece of paper reminded me every day. And I would say that would stop me long enough to say that. I mean, that prayer didn't take me too long.
Right.
So, but I was doing it. And I pretty much still use that same framework today.
Yeah, when I first got to starting to pray, I didn't start praying until I had got into IOP. When I got into IOP, that's when I did the third step, roughly, give or take. I think that was right around October, and that's when I did the third step. Now, I would pray, like, from time to time.
Yeah, God, please get me out of this mess.
Yeah, like the foxhole prayers. And even like in recovery, like the only prayer that I knew was just like the Serenity Prayer and Our Father's Prayer, but I didn't really say the Our Father's Prayer.
Some people get a block against that.
But after I got through the third step, that's when I started praying every day, and then I would have, and I got told, or I wouldn't say I got told, but I got suggested how to do like a prayer, like the start of the day, and usually it follows like, thank you for allowing me to wake up today. Thank you for allowing me to wake up sober today. Thank you for, presenting me all the blessings and the opportunities that you've blessed me thus far. And then I start thanking, my higher power for introducing me to Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank him for introducing me to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank him for introducing me to an effective sponsorship and an effective fellowship, followed by a strong support system. And then I start praying for everybody else. And then at the end of it, I'll ask my higher power to keep me sober for today. And then I would say the Serenity Prayer, and then I would say the third step prayer. And then when I got to the seventh step, I started saying the seventh step prayer. And then I end it with Our Father's Prayer. And that's my prayer every day. Takes me about like 5 to 10 minutes, give or take. Especially if there's like a lot of people like in the group chat that ask for prayers. That first prayer gets extended out, depending on how many people that I pray for. But then now some mornings I won't be able to do the prayer and the meditation at that particular time. So I would do like my prayer, and then I'm fortunate enough to have a job to where like I have my own office. So like if I get to the office, check what I need to do, I can set up my meditation in my office, because no one's going to come in my office. Hardly anyone does. They don't have a reason to.
And if they do, well, we've probably heard this. I had a breathalyzer in my house for the first 9 months of my recovery. And it would always, it tended to call for me when I was meditating, especially in the morning. And there was a little bit of thing that I would be like, this screwed it up, but I learned to receive the interruption and then finish my meditation afterwards. I'd run upstairs. There's the only working phone line in the house was upstairs, so I had a baby monitor set up on it, and had the receiver or whatever, and I would carry it around with me, or I'd set it on my nightstand next to the bed. Rarely did they wake me up at night, but it wasn't terribly unusual for them to hit me about 11 o'clock. And yeah, but that I look back and like. I learned a lot by getting my meditations interrupted.
I'm learning that my meditations get interrupted today.
Yep. And it don't matter. It's like you can't pray wrong, and you can't meditate wrong either.
Right.
It's the Nike thing, man. Just do it. It's all it is.
Absolutely.
And, if it gets cut completely off and you get pulled away to doing something else, dealing with a baby or something else, it don't matter. Your intention was to do it, and the universe called you out to do something else.
Right. I did forget to mention, so when I got out of RAC, I had a sponsor. He wasn't at SU at the time, or actually, he still doesn't go to SU at all. But he would go and do meetings at RAC on Monday nights, and he was part of that friend group that I was in. And I asked him for him to be my sponsor. When I got out of RAC, I told him my brilliant idea of getting into a relationship that he highly did not suggest. I prayed on it and I sat on it for a minute, and then I called him the next day and I told him that, I appreciate the suggestion, but that's probably one I'm not going to follow. And he was like, okay. He was like, well, it's only a suggestion. It's not like I can force you. You wouldn't be you're not the first one, and you're evidently not going to be the last one either. And I was like, okay. I think a week rolled by. He picked me up to take me to the Quarterly, and the whole ride there, he pretty much was trying to allude to the fact that I needed to be all in on his suggestions, or he alluded that he shouldn't be my sponsor. And we had this whole conversation about it, and it really left a sour taste in my mouth. And I was like, I think it's time for me to find a new sponsor. So that's when I ended up calling the sponsor that I have today, which was my grand sponsor before I went to treatment. Because when I went to treatment, that was when my sponsor said, we can't. He was like, obviously, whatever I'm doing is not working. So he was like, we'll still be best friends, and we still are to this day. But he was like, you need to find someone that you will be able to do the work with. Which I'd contacted my current sponsor and asked him to be my sponsor, and I was like, now there is one thing that I'm going to preface as the reason why my last sponsor didn't work. And I was like, there was one suggestion and only one that I was not willing to follow, and it was that because I'm getting into I'm in a relationship now. And he was just like, well, I don't suggest that for sure. I would be 100% agreeance with that. And he was like, however, you're already in the relationship prior to asking me to sponsor you. So he was like, we're just going to roll with it. And if anything happens, it happens, and we'll get through it. And still my sponsor till this day. I talked to him since December 12th of 2024. I called him about 5 times a day. But I'd still make sure to call him at least once a day. But it was real funny. On my 1 year, I went to, hang out with him because he has a pool at his house, and it was summer. So I wanted to, enjoy my 1 year, because we went to P.F. Chang's with my family before, and then we were going to go hang out with me and my girlfriend, hang out with him. And there was supposedly a meteor shower going on that night. So we ended up sticking it out, and we got to see a little bit of that meteor shower in August, which that's what told us that what we saw was more or less maybe a comet than a meteor. But yeah, me and my girlfriend are still together till this day. We're one of those, we've so far and continuing to beat the statistics. She birthed our son on December 12th, 2024, named Theodore. We call him Theo, and he's my bundles of joy. And even, even having a child in recovery, helping trying to take care of a child and taking on a bigger responsibility at work where I'm salary, which I can work, 12-hour shifts one day and still come home and have to take care of a newborn. I don't put recovery on the back burner. I have seen people do that, and those people that do that oftentimes go back out. I've learned not only from my home group, but from other places as well, that if you continue to stay plugged in, you'll be just fine. So I still sponsor people. I do have a sponsee right now. I still go to meetings every week, and maybe it would just be 2 to 3 meetings. But there was an appointed time where I was going to 7 meetings a week up until my 1 year, and then I dropped it down to 5 until he was born, and then it's now like 2 to 3. But I still stay plugged in. I try not to. I often see a lot of people, get their life back, and then wave goodbye to AA.
You said oftentimes go back out, but my experience is most of the time people that, I can't count the amount of people that I've seen come in and get a 1-year chip and then fade away. I call it drifting. They drift off, and I rarely see that ever work out for people. Now, sometimes I never see them again. And oftentimes they come back in
with a new date,
getting the white chip.
Mm-hmm.
And there's quite a few handfuls of them out there that I know that have never made it back in, and they're just still out. They haven't been able to find their way back in.
That's sad.
And you get, I warn people too, there's some dynamic, and it's not always, and I've watched a couple people break this rule, but when you actually get it, you stumble out of the gates and but when you actually get it, and you put together a year or 2 or whatever, 4, if you relapse, then I never see them get back to the level they were at. They'll get back and be sober again, but like the fire is not in them like it was in that time when they got it and kept it for a while. Mighty tough. Now, I've got 2 particular sponsees that have beat that rule and are better than ever after doing that. But what I see more times than not, it's the other way around. So don't lose this time you got, man. There's something deflating about losing it. And it took me, I got that year, and it took me 4 more or 3.5 more years to even get a sobriety date after drifting. Mm-hmm. I let the life AA give me get in the way of my AA life, and I just didn't have time to be doing all that. I was like you. Was coaching the Suns T-ball team and was the Cub master and was doing all this stuff that AA basically gave me the ability to do because I wouldn't have been able to prior to that. But that allowed me to push recovery to the sides, and I know from my own experience that didn't work out well for me either.
Yeah, I try. Obviously, currently my plate is pretty full, but I try to even though I am doing a lot of things like recovery wise, sponsoring guys and whatnot, I always still try to leave room on my plate to where if anything in recovery comes in my way, I say no. I won't say no to it. That way I can make time for recovery.
That crystal ball that's sitting in front of you, recovery gave that to me. And I know what's going to happen. I look in that crystal ball. I know what's going to happen to me if I don't continue to participate in my recovery. And the flip side of it is I know what's going to happen to you if you don't either. That crystal ball goes both ways, and I use it as kind of a joke, but there's some truth to it too.
Absolutely. The common denominator that I see of people that have years on their belt that unfortunately go back out the common denominator is they stop doing what works. And what I mean by that is and it doesn't come like all at once either. Like they'll stop praying. Well, then they stop talking to their sponsor every day. Well, then they stop going to meetings. And then sooner or later, like they just stop everything recovery-wise. And lo and behold, before you know it, they're already back out.
It's the drifting, and we see it. You stop. You see the guy at home group meeting every week, and then one week he ain't there, and then he comes back the next week, and then he ain't there, and then maybe 2 weeks, and you watch people do that, and you can see it happening. And I know when my guys stop calling me, when I stop hearing from them, I'll jerk a knot in their tail a few times, but I'm not going to chase them.
Right.
And there comes a time when I got to drop you if you're not going to, I got sever a relationship because we're not really doing sponsor thing. We're not doing it anymore, and you're not at the meeting, and we're not continuing to enlarge our personal relationship with one another. So, and I try to hope that puts heat on them, that they'll make a course correction. But I have one right now that is not, and we're getting ready to have that talk, the final talk.
And it happens. I gotta call my sponsee, because I technically I have two. Now one calls me every day.
That is a sponsee.
Yeah.
The other one is not.
No, because that other sponsee, he was calling me every day too, but all of a sudden, like when it was time to get to his third step, we were planning on a day, and I told him to call me to see if I can, if nothing on my work pops off, we can do it. Because my work, I could have a day where nothing's scheduled, and then all of a sudden something could pop off. Or I could have, it's like one of three ways. It's either that way, or I'll have something scheduled, but oftentimes they're not that can cancel. Or...
Well, this work we do needs to be scheduled. And
Absolutely.
Sometimes the schedule gets interrupted sometimes, and we reschedule.
Absolutely.
But there's a big piece of this. I like the word demonstration. I'm making a demonstration to my higher power that I mean this, and that's by doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And also the intention. This has to be done with intention. That means I'm going to be doing this stuff. And it's interesting because it's some guy that's not wanting to do his third. Now, this is parasite stuff and computer hijacking and that, and it's any more than likely. But if he's kicking the can down the road on making his third step decision, that's very telling.
Well, he's pretty much like agreed that we would be able to, because we had talked on a Monday, and we were like, now we might have to play around with the time, but we can do it tomorrow, which would have been a Tuesday.
It don't take long.
I know. And he didn't call me Tuesday. And then before you know it, I just realized it's been like 2.5 weeks since he's called me. I didn't even realize it's been 2.5 weeks because I've just been so busy, working with my other sponsee, and then, still taking care of a newborn, doing my work and everything like that, it just dawned on me that he hasn't called me in a while. So now I'm going to have that same conversation with that other sponsee as well. Hopefully he's still doing, good, but it's
How much time's he got? Approximately a month, 2 months, 6 months?
Between a month and 2, I think.
Yeah, if he hasn't called his sponsor in 2.5 weeks, it's probably highly unlikely that he's doing good.
Yeah.
Now, he may tell you who he is, but...
Yeah.
And, even in my life, I found my sweet spot is no more than 2 guys in the work at a time. That with a regular old life and having stuff to do, not to mention like a newborn, which I don't have, having 2 sponsees at the same time is my limit.
Mm-hmm. And I was trying that limit because I wasn't going to go above 2.
I don't think you can.
No.
Because this does take energy, and if you're like, just like you said, I might go to say that 1 at a time is maybe your limit, because if you've let a sponsee slip away for 2.5 weeks and just now realized it, then that might be exceeding your limit.
Yeah, and my sponsor and I talked about that, because it wasn't just now dawned on me, but the couple days it's dawned on me that he hasn't called me in a while. And he was like, well, maybe your limit right now is just 1 sponsee at a time. And I was like, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Call him on your way home.
Sure will. But yeah, that was pretty much my life in a nutshell. Still doing.
Yeah, one thing about guys that come when they're still like inside a couple years of recovery, how it says what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. The what it like now period is relatively short, because you only been really doing the madness, not madness like that, but let's just throw out the first year of recovery. It's kind of a whirlwind anyway, right? You're just clawing and scratching to get and stay sober, man, and that's the priority in your life. But as with what happens is it will settle down, and then actually you get to start enjoying the fruits of recovery once all that starts settling down.
Absolutely. And even though this is technically like my first time like fully telling my story, like the whole time when the opportunity would present itself to me, like I knew that I wanted to focus more on what it's like now than what it's like before. Because
as that period grows, you get more of it to talk about, right? I mean, I've got a whole bunch of that to talk about, or at least feels like a whole bunch. But when I still like to get guys in here when they're new, because that first year of recovery is such a life-changing event.
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, my life did a whole 360. Like, I no longer live with my parents. I have my own place with my girlfriend now. I have a son now. I have a family. I have a son that can see me, that never has to witness me be either drunk or high. I, technically speaking, have the highest paying job that I've had in my life. Which that's always room for growth. I have the most thing that I have today that tops all of that is peace and serenity and the happy, joyous, and free.
Yeah.
You can get any materialistic thing that you can want, and it will never be able to match itself with peace and serenity.
It all falls short. Everything
Always.
I thought I wanted, the new wears off of it in a day or two, and I'm back where I was a minute ago.
Absolutely.
But this keeps on. The bill says this is a limitless load that keeps on paying dividends as long as you keep doing it for the rest of your life and give it all away. That's another one of the things, like the meditation, one of the things people leave out is sponsoring guys. And if you leave that off the table, you just don't get what this program has to offer.
Yeah, that is something.
And you don't have to be successful at it either. That's the great thing about it.
No.
Every guy can drop off. They can all relapse, but you still get the recovery point, so to speak, like karma, just because you're trying.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my very first sponsor. I remember I was still going through the steps when he shared this, but he did a lead at a meeting, not our home group, but he did a meeting at a different, at the Token Club, and it was about step 12, and he was like, it is probably the most disrespectful, selfish thing that you can do to finish the steps and say,
I've got mine.
I don't need to sponsor anybody. And I was like 100% agreeance. It's like someone took the time out of their day to teach me not only how to, get some time under my belt, but also be able to maintain sobriety. And not only that, but teach me of like who I really am, and better myself. And why would I, pretty much wave goodbye to AA and not do that for the next newcomer? Someone was so willing to do that for me. Why can't I share the same respect to do that for the next guy?
What's the root of our problem? The root of our troubles? Selfishness, self-centeredness.
Yeah.
The antidote to that is taking people through the work and sponsoring people. That is the solid, hardcore antidote. When all else fails, work with another alcoholic and so on and so forth. And over and over again, it says you can't get away without, your recovery's not going to survive if you don't do that.
No.
I had to beat that self-centeredness down by doing that.
Absolutely.
Because it will regrow. It rises from the ashes like the phoenix, the ego does. And the only way I can keep myself right-sized and humbled is by continuing to take people through this work.
Absolutely. It's just, not only do you, and now I get to firsthand experience this, but like, not only do you have the opportunity to help someone else, but you helping someone else is also helping yourself to maintain your sobriety. So why not utilize that tool? And if you want to think it selfishly, think of it for yourself to maintain sobriety. If you want to feed that selfishness, you know what I mean? But, while you're doing that, in the back of your mind, in reality, you're also still being, selfless by helping someone else get through the work and better themselves and be able to get sobriety. If you want to look at it that way, if you're really like selfish and self-centeredness.
There's nothing that fulfills me more than taking a man through this work. There really isn't. There's nothing. I don't have a single thing in my life that fulfills me more.
Yeah, I'm supposed to take my sponsor through the third step, and we were going to do it Saturday, but two things kind of came into play. Because when I got through my third step, it was in nature. And I have like a perfect like spot that that I could do it on, and my sponsor was just like, well, shouldn't you let your sponsee like choose the place to do the third step? I was like, well, last time I checked, you didn't give me a choice on the third step. And he was like, you're right.
I do that. That's another piece of my formula. That's the recipe. Is to say, hey, man, pick some place that means something to you, because this is going to mean something to you. And that spot's going to be forever in your heart. So, and I have done them all over the crazy places, man, at people's tombstones. We drove to Bardstown on one to go down and do it at the pond in the parents' backyard, and few at different spots along the Ohio River, a few in Cherokee Park in different locations. But yeah, I think that's important to allow them to pick.
Yeah, for sure.
It's their recovery.
That is fair. I'm going to ask him when we're doing it. But
I tell people, as long as I don't have to drive over 30 minutes, I don't really want to do that. And I ain't getting on an airplane.
Yeah.
But otherwise, and I've had people choose to do it in my living room because we'd been working the steps here, and this spot became something meaningful to them. Same thing with the wood shop. I had one opportunity to, we didn't drive down there. We were there anyway, but it just lined up to do it at the cabin. He'd come down and help me get some stuff ready the weekend before, and we spent the night, and it just lined up, and it was his third step, and he said, hey, can we do it down there? Absolutely. I know some people have done their third step prayers at the retreat.
Oh, that's awesome.
I had somebody ask about a fifth step, and I was like, nah.
Yeah. Like at the retreat?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's what I meant. It was like, well, you can take time out of retreat and go. No, that doesn't sound like a good idea to me, brother.
Yeah.
And I've had one person ask me if they could take their guy down to the cabin and do his fifth step at my cabin, like separate from me. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that either. That's my spot.
Get your own spot.
Yeah. I've done every single one of mine down there, all my first ones. When I've had the opportunity to take a guy through the work second time, most time they just come over here. I think most of them been in the wood shop. just because it's got some privacy in there and good enough place to do it. Well, I appreciate you coming in and telling your story, man. I'm proud of you. It's always a joy to witness these, to watch these guys come stumbling in here and trying to get traction, and then they finally do, and you get to see their trajectory of their life changes and starts going in a correct direction every single time if they can get that traction, if they come in here and surrender and do the work. If you do the work, you get the results. That's just the way it is.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'm very honored that you asked me to come on here. It's definitely a pleasure to be here.
I'm glad you did, brother. I always, sometimes I've been forgetting, and this is getting back into the groove, because my other guests I have don't really fit this as much, but as traditionally, I sign off by saying two things. If you're not having a blast in your recovery, you're not doing it right. And I just want to thank everybody out there for allowing Sam and I to participate in our recovery in this manner today. Peace out.
Peace out.